The car dealership was having an unusually slow morning that day. However, the sales room employees have long gotten used to this phenomenon and weren't concerned about it in the least. The staff were supposed to identify visitors who could actually buy any of the display cars, as most people usually came to the dealership to look at the expensive cars, having neither the intention nor the means to buy one. Experienced managers had a trained eye, and they could easily recognize a potential buyer when they saw one. Therefore, when the dealership doors opened and a hunched-over elderly man with a small canvas bag came in, the sales managers immediately lost interest. This man definitely wasn't there to buy a car. He probably got confused, thinking it was a supermarket or something. However, they were surprised to see the old man's strange behavior. He went to the front desk and asked the receptionist to keep an eye on his bag, which he casually put on the floor. Then, shuffling his worn-out shoes on the glossy floor of the dealership, the old man began to carefully examine the cars parked in the exhibition hall. He was dressed in a shabby cowboy shirt, worn over a plaid shirt, loose-fitting pants, and an old hat with a sagging brim that made his look rather undermining. All this time, the sales managers watched the strange visitor, not even trying to hide their malicious smiles. They were sure that the old man was poor and probably out of his mind, and only came in to admire the expensive cars. The old man meticulously examined one car after another, until finally he settled on the most expensive one. What is the engine capacity of this beauty, and its clearance? And can I look at the interior? The old man asked in a quiet, hoarse voice. One of the most experienced managers, who was already sick of watching the old man, came up to him and explained in a haughty voice that the price of the car had increased, and that it was actually reserved for someone else. But why is that? There's a price tag on the car. Doesn't it mean that the car is for sale? The old man objected, feeling the snide look of the senior manager. Mister, I don't know your name. You see, another person has decided to buy this car. Moreover, the price of this car increased due to an increase in the cost of the imported parts. Anyway, I think you should try the used car rental service. I'm sure they will find something more suitable for your age and financial condition. This phrase instantly triggered a burst of laughter among the dealership staff, who were enjoying the show. Only Chris, a young manager who had recently started the job, wasn't laughing. He felt sorry for the old man, who looked like a poor lamb surrounded by a flock of evil hyenas. Unable to tolerate the senior manager's contempt for the elderly person, Chris stepped closer and suggested quietly, "Mr. Brown, can the man see the car after all? He's still our client, isn't he?" The senior manager responded by quietly gritting his teeth and looking at Chris with such hostility that Chris felt completely out of place and simply walked away. Meanwhile, the old man kept standing there quietly, patiently waiting for the manager to open the door so he could access the quality of the interior and the dashboard. However, Mr. Brown called security instead, who then escorted the strange buyer to the exit, waving his baton. "I think you'd better leave. The car is very expensive and you aren't exactly young. You can accidentally damage something inside." The senior manager said goodbye, glad that he'd gotten rid of the old man so easily. The unjust treatment brought tears to the old man's eyes, and he kept wiping them away, trying not to cry right in the sales room. Only when he got outside did the man allow himself to cry, and hunched over, he walked away. At that same moment, the dealership administrator saw the bag left behind by the old man, and unwilling to pick it up, she used her foot to push it towards the exit. The other employees laughed when they saw it, appreciating a good joke. The fun was again interrupted by the young manager Chris, who silently took the bag and went outside, feeling the mocking glances of his colleagues on his back. Fortunately, the elderly man didn't get far. When Chris caught up to the old man, he touched his shoulder and handed over the bag. Then, looking down in embarrassment, Chris apologized for the behavior of his colleagues, who mistook his unkempt clothes for a sign that he was a homeless person. In response to this, the old man opened his bag and, smiling, showed its contents to the young manager. Inside the bag were many bundles of $100 bills strapped with elastic bands. Chris was intrigued and looked questioningly at the old man. Enjoying the effect, the old man coughed and, closing his bag, began his story. As it turned out, his name was Robert Jones. The old man, with an impressive amount of money in his bag, had been collecting bottles and cardboard, which he then brought to recycling centers. Mr. Jones scrupulously saved up all the money he earned because he wanted to buy a car, which his wife, Catherine, had been dreaming of for a while. The fact was that his wife had been fighting cancer for several years and seemed to be losing the fight. In order to pay for her chemotherapy, they had to sell their home and move into a trailer. Realizing that the treatment didn't work, Mr. Jones decided to fulfill his wife's cherished dream and buy her a car. Unfortunately, by the time the old man was able to save up enough money, the price of the car had increased. Now he didn't have enough to buy the car he wanted. When Chris found out how much money Mr. Jones was short of, he got to thinking. Chris knew that the car dealership could hardly afford such a discount. After escorting the old man home, Chris went back to work. He was tormented by the thought of the old man and his wife's dream. Thus, later that evening, he found himself at Mr. Jones's door holding a bundle in his hands. "Here is the entire amount you're short of. Buy your wife that car," said the manager. And handing the old man a bundle of bills wrapped in cellophane, he went away before he could see the old man tear up. The next day, Mr. Jones came back to the dealership. The employees of the sales room were dumbfounded when they saw the old man. They couldn't understand how he had changed so drastically in such a short time. The fact was that Mr. Jones was wearing a business suit, a snow-white shirt, and polished shoes. He was carrying the same frayed canvas bag. To make sure that neither the security nor the managers would ask him to leave, the old man opened the bag and showed its contents to everyone. Seeing the piles of money, the employees immediately started fussing around Mr. Jones, whom they believed to be homeless just the day before. After examining the car from every possible angle and learning its characteristics, the old man bought it. At that same moment, every person in the room was envious of the old man for having the money for such an expensive purchase. And only Chris wasn't jealous of him, knowing what his car really cost Mr. Jones. Thus, the old man went home in his own car. Having parked the beautiful ride not too far from his house, Mr. Jones went inside. Smiling mysteriously, he took his wife by the hand and led her out into the street, gesturing at the expensive car. Catherine was on cloud 9. Finally, despite her fatal illness, that dream was fulfilled for her. They drove around the neighborhood until late at night, enjoying the time they had together and having fun. That evening was undoubtedly the happiest one of Mrs. Jones's life, and it seemed to the woman that even the illness had receded, giving her time to enjoy her dream. Catherine passed away the next day. It seemed mundane, but still scary. Mr. Jones tried to comfort himself with the thought that he'd managed to give his wife a short moment of happiness before her death. The old man took the keys and the documents for the car back to the dealership, where he signed the car over to Chris. Mr. Jones knew that Chris was saving money to buy his own car, but he chose to give it away to make a dying woman's dream come true. Chris and Robert Jones now spend many evenings together, driving around the places Catherine loved so much.